This is Kara Tucker from the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. Today, the 10th of August, 2019, we are recording an interview about the 1969 forgotten tornado. If you would please state your name, birth date, and where you were born, we will begin.
Okay. My name is Patti Myers. I was born in Cincinnati, or actually, I guess that's Springdale, at the Maple Knoll Hospital, when it was a general hospital for the community too, in 1950. And my parents lived in Laughlin, and then they moved to North College Hill, and then they moved to Wyoming. On West Mills was the last street in Wyoming in 1956. And I have two sisters, Paula, 2.5 years younger than me, and Kathy was 8 years younger than me.
So your family has lived in the Wyoming area, or have you lived in the Wyoming area since that time? Or?
No, I was there till I was 21.
Okay.
And then moved on to many different areas, lived in there for a little while longer, years later, and then now I live in Springfield Township.
What took your family there when you were growing up?
Well, why they took us to West Mills, or I think my mom didn't like North College Hill because it was no trees, and she was from Laughlin, and she wanted to live closer to her parents and other family members. So Wyoming and Laughlin are close together, and they found a house on West Mills. And they were there till they both passed away, and that's almost 10 years ago now.
So you lived there from childhood, kind of through your teens?
From 1956, when they bought the house, till when I was 21, so 71 is when I moved out.
What was it like growing up there?
Oh, gosh. I know we're talking about the tornado, but the whole area where the damage was done with the stores and things were not there when I grew up. There was houses. There was a guy who had like chickens, and we could hear chickens crowing in the morning. And then right down the road was Lucan's blacksmith shop on the corner of Compton and called Locust Street, but now it's St. Clair Avenue. They had a horse there behind the blacksmith shop. Their house was next door. The Lucan's parents' house was next door. That eventually tore down, and then they got, what's there now? It was the Compton Medical Building was put there. But all those stores were not there. The Vogue Cafe was there forever. It was there prior to us even moving there. I don't know how old that place is. And Hugg's Jewelers was there on Vine Street. I can recall, eventually they put there was a UDF on Vine Street, but not where, there was a couple places there. But it was down kind of where, there's a Chinese restaurant down there now on Vine Street, close to Hartwell School. And we would walk down there to get ice cream at UDF. I remember the counter being way up high for me when I remember first being there. And we would look for change along the edge of the Vogue Cafe. My mom says, we're going to buy ice cream with money we find in the gravel along the ditches, because the drunks lose their money when they leave the bar. So we would find nickels and quarters and dimes and pennies, and we collected all. We would always keep looking for coins every time we would walk up that way, gleaning money from the gravel to buy ice cream. I remember that very well. But we rode bikes. There was a creek with the St. Clair Convent was behind our house there, and there was a creek that ran through there, and we'd always be playing in there, and a lot of times the nuns would chase us out in certain areas when they find us there. But we had fun. We would play in the water and ride bikes and with the neighborhood kids, and that's kind of how we grew up.
So it sounds like not even you had an experience with the neighborhood and area, not even just before and after the tornado, but before and after there was a lot of change and development along Vine Street too.
Right. And the Vogue Theater was there also. It was a neighborhood theater. Mrs. Chase was the owner, and my dad did extra. Dad was a factory worker at Procter & Gamble, and he also did side work of carpentry stuff. And Mrs. Chase, the owner of the Vogue Cafe, the Vogue Theater, would have him build things for her, fix things in the theater. They would have previews, and again, this is hard for younger people to understand. They would have like little 5x7 pictures of segments of the movie, like clips from the movie for like previews, 6 or 7 of them outside the marquee and under the glass. And they had little frames on. My dad made all those frames for those things. And I remember it was, anywhere from, I think it was a quarter, then it went up to 50 cents to go to the movies, Saturday matinee, and they would have prizes. You'd go in, they have cartoons, and then they'd have a break. And then we would have a ticket, and you have a number, and she would be very stern and yell at us, and she had this very dignified tone of her voice. Now, children, and we're not going to read the numbers if you do not be quiet. I mean, we had to be quiet, because she would whisper the numbers, so you had to be quiet if you wanted to win these cheap little prizes that we all won. Several, I only had 4 or 5 prizes. And then the main, feature would be come on, like Sinbad the Sailor or Bye Bye Birdie. I remember seeing that. Just different movies we would watch, on the Saturday matinees. Those were fun. But because I lived so close to it, we could walk there, to the theater.
It sounds like a really nice setup for people who are growing up in an area and things to do. Well, let's go forward a little bit to the day of the tornado, if we might. What were you up to that day? What were you doing? What was it like?
It was a Saturday, and I was going to go out on a date with someone for the first time. And I know the tornado struck, it was close to between 6 and 7. I think it's closer to 7. And I was already ready, dressed, ready to go out, and it started to rain. My one sister, Paula, who's 16, almost 17, she was working. She worked at Murphy's, was at 5 and 10 over in Swifton. And she just had get started to drive or whatever, so she had this part-time job or whatever at the 5 and 10 at Swifton Center, Murphy's. But she wasn't home. But my sister, little sister Kathy, and her friend Peggy Lynn Holt was upstairs and playing, and my mother was there, my dad was there. I was waiting for this date, I guess, when I don't know what time that man was supposed to show up. 19, kid, I should say, another kid. It started to rain and the wind was blowing. And we have these, what I call jalousie windows, which is kind of the old time windows that kind of, open and shut on themselves. But anyway, we had like a big, like a picture window of them, like 3 panels and then 2 on the side. It was a kitchen, big kitchen my dad had added to the house. And anyway, I started to go shut them because it was wind that was coming in. This is before central air now, so we had the windows open in August.
Sure.
And I went to shut them all. And then something told me as the wind got higher and higher, and it seemed more violent, I mean, really windy, and sticks are starting to fly around. Something told me, it just felt like I should go back and crack all those windows open. And now I finally, later they say, yes, you should do that for the pressure, although jalousie windows aren't that pressure resistant. But something told me just to crack them open a little bit to let more air in. Okay, and I did that. But all this while, I'm watching this stuff fly around. I mean, big limbs all of a sudden, and I hear cracks, and I hear, just this wind. They talk about the sound of a train. It's kind of like it goes in and out, that eerie sound, I don't know if as it rotates or whatever.
Wow.
It would come and go and come and go. And I guess I was hollering and screaming. I don't remember, because my dad said he was in the garage, which is right below me. He came up when he heard me, and he was behind me. I did not know he was standing behind me the whole time watching the same thing.
Oh, wow.
Okay, we should have said, get away from the window, let's all head to the basement. But no, we didn't know what to do there. We're watching it. It was like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, except the Wicked Witch of the West did not fly by. But I saw this 200-year-old maple tree that was the end of our driveway, which is the back of our house, come right out of the ground. I mean, literally up, straight up, and then fell down along the side of what we call the back road, which is St. Clair Avenue. Along there, and then all you could see was white and sticks and leaves, and I would see other trees bending and going back and forth and back and forth, and then going down for the last count, and when it was all over, I realized my dad was there, and then we heard my mom, because couldn't hear anything else. She was upstairs with my sister because these little windows opened up on the hallway upstairs. They could not shut, and my mom was upstairs. The worst place to be with my sister and the neighbor girl.
Sure.
Couldn't get the windows shut, leaves, sticks, and everything flying in. My mom said all you could see was white, gray, white, and sticks and leaves. Fortunately, we only lost a piece of gutter pipe and some fencing, panel fencing in the yard. Don't ask, But we are about 50, maybe I'm guessing 50 yards from the Kroger store, which was on Mary Street. Okay, the very back part of Kroger's there. And it literally ripped the back of Kroger's off, that loading dock that was back there. And then after it was finished and we kind of all gathered together and realized what had happened, or, of course I go out there, I remember changing my shoes because I knew there was no date.
Sure.
There was no cell phones, no phone to call on. We had no power for a week,
Wow.
no phone for a week. Fun in August, not fun anytime, but yeah. So I remember changing my shoes and then going up the street, running into a neighbor, another kid up the street who's about 3 or 4 years younger than me, Jeff Winholt. I have no idea where he is today. We started going back up the street to see what was going on because we knew how the storm was everywhere, but we went up the street. Mm-hmm. We got up to the corner of West Mills and Springfield Pike, which Vine Street's name changes when it hits Wyoming. And the Sanders lived on the corner, and Glenn Sanders was out yelling out the upstairs bedroom window at Jeff and I, but there was electric lines and they were hitting their house. You could see them,
Wow,
sparking.
Sure.
And we said, "Don't come out, Glenn.
Mm-hmm.
There's wires hitting your house." And of course, here we are jumping over wires all over the street. It's like, man, we better be careful because I see these sparks maybe. But I'm 19, Jeff might have been 16, I don't know. We run up to the corner, go down toward Hartwell, come into the parking lot, which was a Super X drugstore, which the Country Fresh Produce or whatever they call it now is there, and where the PNC Bank used to be, and all that whole area where Kroger's, which is I think Family Dollar now, and then Liberals, which is now Long's Furniture, if you want to know where I'm talking about now, currently. But then the whole front of the Super X drugstore had collapsed. So the roof had just kind of gone down like that to the front. If this was the front. And we saw the pharmacist wandering the parking lot. And he was in shock. We asked him if he was okay, if everybody had gotten out. And he said, "I hope so, I think so, I don't know." And just people crying, wandering around. You could hear glass breaking inside the Super X drugstore, different things falling down. The whole bank was gone, and all I could think of was, there's my money's in that bank. The liquor store was the state liquor store was on the corner of Hartford and Vine. It was already being opportunist, taking advantage of that being broken down. It was just pure chaos, and just everything was cars smashed to about 2.5, 3 feet maybe in front of Liberal when the facade from the front of it came down. You could not walk on the road behind my parents' house, and all that whole area was full of trees and limbs broken. It was just devastating, just people wandering around in a daze and just not knowing what to do. They were in shock,
Sure.
what to do.
Was that what basically the rest of the evening was like?
Yeah, it was
no
quiet.
emergency
You could hear
personnel?
sirens. What was interesting was my sister that worked at Murphy's over in Swifton. Well, it rained hard and it thundered, and and they had wind. And Paula, my sister, said she could hear. Nobody knew what they knew. We had a tornado, and so they said it was blowing so hard the big windows, like in the store, were moving. Okay, so she was not at home. She was over there, which was not in direct line, close to the tornado area, because I know after I left Hartwell into Reading, into apparently Silverton, Deer Park, and part of Madeira, I think, before it fizzled. But it was close enough to where the damage of the storm was kind of generally on the outskirts too. But it was really windy, and when the windows were shaking. So she leaves. Now remember, she's a new driver. She's 16. and she starts to come home the way she knows to come home, to come up Vine Street.
Mm-hmm.
She gets to Galbraith, or before Galbraith Road, or at Galbraith Road by Hartwell School. And there's police there, and it's blocked off. You cannot drive down Springfield Pike, Vine Street in Springfield Pike. They stopped it right by Wyoming, and they stopped it at Galbraith.
Wow.
Because there was nobody, they wanted nobody drive, because the wires were down and
Sure.
all the kind of debris everywhere. So she didn't know. So they rerouted her. I don't know if it might have been even North Bend Road. I'm not sure. It was pretty far down. She said she wasn't familiar. So now she's driving up on Hamilton Avenue, not knowing how to go. It's dark. It has been raining.
Yeah.
And they said that she did not know what happened, and they told her a tornado had come through, and there's a lot of damage. She thought we were all dead.
Oh, wow.
So she's panicking, driving, finally made her way around and came back the other way. She had to park her car on Springfield Pike and had to show ID that where she lived to get into the neighborhood, so she could be able to, and they were able, I guess it was safe enough for her in the dark to walk down the street, and she was hysterical when she got home. And we were all in the dark in flashlights.
So it was
Okay.
a few hours later then.
Well, yeah, because I think she got off at 9.
Oh,
It was
okay.
7, roughly 7 when the tornado hit, and it was 9 when she got home. And she thought we were all dead. I know another neighbor, he wasn't home, and he tried to get in, but he was a very obstinate man. He got in a fight and got arrested by the Wyoming police for arguing with him and said, "I live here. I don't need to show you my ID." We remember that too. Little things like that. Another friend tells us that he was in Frisch's parking lot with his sister. The guy I told you, Glenn, was hanging out his window with the sparked wires flashing on the house. Well, his brother Kenny Sanders and his sister Vicky Sanders were at Frisch's in the parking lot, in the car, you know, and it was terrifying, they said, to be, you know, seeing what was going on. And I had to get more detail from Kenny, because, you know, if the car was moving, or I'm sure it was moving. But yes, that's the story they tell me too,
Sure.
of what was going on. And a friend of my sister's who lived on Woodbine, which is a few houses down from the Hartwell School, there on Galbraith and Woodbine, that had the 3 people died there. She said that her and her sisters were in their bedroom, and her mother got them out of the bedroom within seconds before the whole top of the house was ripped. The whole walls of the bedroom were ripped up. I think one of the pictures I brought showed that house.
So about the pictures too that you brought that were digitizing.
Yes.
Were those taken the next day, or can you tell me about
Probably the next day.
experience
Well,
of
the next
taking
day,
these
because at the
photos?
time I ran out of the house, I did not. Well, I think we were still all in kind of a shock.
Sure.
You know, my dad said I was hollering and screaming. I don't remember doing any of that. Watching this take place, and, you know, everything blowing around, because I knew it wasn't good. But it was the next day, because it was in the evening, 7. Of course, it was summer. We still had enough light, but still, it was not, you know. And I guess we came back home and make sure that all the electric wires were, you know, disabled,
Sure.
so nobody else would be stepping on them. National Guard the next day was walking behind our house. As our house had West Mills in the front, and the back road, St. Clair Avenue, it was on the back half of our house. So we had streets on both sides of our house. And we could see the National Guard walking down right behind our house. And of course, in Vine Street, they were there, because the next morning we're out running around and seeing what's going on, and the cleanup begins. And that's where the pictures are showing a lot of that second day. The day after, the morning after.
Were there a lot of people out and about walking
Oh
around?
yes, and there was people coming in.
Looky booth.
Couldn't drive. They had it blocked off still for quite a while. Driving around the phone booth in front of Igler's drugstore was, excuse me, had the whole the cord for the phone, which is metal, was all tied in this elaborate knot. It was amazing what this storm had done, and things you would never know were sitting different places. And relating to this story, my sister had a friend. She worked, I guess, at Swally's drugstore, and Swaley's was where the Medical Compton building is now. Well, was. I think that building pretty much is empty now. But it used to be there. It's closed now. But there was a drugstore called Swaley's Drugstore. And she said the two pharmacists they stayed the night in the pharmacy because all the windows were blown out, and they stayed in the back in the pharmacy and stayed there all night because they had to watch the drugs. And I'm sure somebody was in Igler's too. Didn't hear that, but I'm sure somebody was in the back of Igler's watching the medications there. I was like, okay. So yeah, it was very, very interesting to have to live through that tornado.
How do you think it impacted the sense of community there, and not just a physical way, but maybe in like a more ephemeral way in any form
I think
or
we
fashion?
all kind of, again, this is 1969, and people talked more than they do now. That's why cell phones are great, but then not so great because it cuts you off of community, I believe, pretty much. You don't talk to people anymore like you used to. And there's no interaction in neighbors as much as there used to be, it was still that way then, but even more so because we were now all out and we couldn't do anything but everybody clean up their yards and whatever, help each other out with different things, And the city came by, they were cutting the big trees and that was in the roadways and clearing the streets of debris and things like that. So their community came about, intermingling more. We were just out doing stuff in everybody else's yard. The kids were they'd be in our yard, we'd go to their yard. I mean, we were all working together on different things. But, just being together.
So you said it took a week before you had telephone and electricity again. You stayed in the house the whole time, I presume? Or?
Well, it was August, probably not.
Well, but you
pretty
remained
much.
at home.
And I guess after we could drive, we get the car. I think my dad's car was in the driveway, so he couldn't get out. You couldn't park on the front. Thank goodness my sister's, the other car was there. I guess my car was stuck in the back too. Until they got the brush cleared away, we couldn't drive.
Right.
Except for the one car, which was the one my sister was driving. So we had enough cars to go around. Don't ask me how that happened back then either, but it did, and we got out, eventually. He cleared enough brush out of the driveway, and then when the city cleared the road, they had to clear the road, that was starting to get clear enough to where we could back out and get the cars out and park them in the front, because the front was not as cluttered with debris of trees and things and wires. Of course, till then. But that, another tree had to be cut down in the front yard, but most of it was right in the back half, right where the tornado touched down. I think that's when it came over the hill, over the convent, and I think the nuns said that they could see it coming. They have 3 floors, so I don't know what floor they were on when they saw it coming. But I wouldn't have been up there at that time. But there was no, somebody said they remember hearing siren. There was no tornado warning sirens. We were not ever instructed what to do in a tornado because we didn't live like in the flatlands of Kansas or, Oklahoma. We weren't used to tornadoes like this. This normally rarely happens in a crowded community.
Sure.
It's usually, a more open land.
Well, that kind of leads me to what might be one of our wrap-up questions then. This is referred to locally as the forgotten tornado, and there are a lot of different reasons why that may be the case, but would you like to maybe surmise why you think maybe it has been, or want to speak to that in any way?
Well, I guess it just affected a certain local area. One part, the very back of Wyoming and Hartwell, Redding, big chunk of Redding, of course, in Silverton and Deer Park, in those areas. But then the rest of the city wasn't affected. The main bulk was in it. So, I think people knew about it, but then it's been 50 years. People talk about 1974 all the time. People think that was the first real one we had come through here. And those that, if you've lived through it, you remember it. You know what it was there. I had a little experience with that tornado too, coming back when I lived in the hippie truck back in the 70s, coming back from Florida to Cincinnati and being involved on 75 through Kentucky. with all the tornadoes. So that's another tornado story altogether. But yeah, that was more significant because this was a lone tornado where all these, like 74 was multiple statewide, wide covered states, many multiple state activity of tornadoes, multiple tornadoes, which is more significant and more damage. I think, not the fact that 4 people died in our tornado, but claim it as ours, but the one that I experienced, but I think with a higher death rate and more damage, I think you get more coverage and more remembering because there's more people that were affected. So.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to share about it, or memories?
Well, I think
or
maybe, we didn't just, I think back then, even though it was the 60s, we just fixed it up and went on. I mean, we don't want to sit here and belabor how bad everything was. It wasn't great, of course. It was not good at all. But we got over it, We just fixed, got it all cleaned up, fixed up, and there we go, and that was the end of that. And that's that.
All right. Well, if that's everything, I thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And we're all finished. Thank you.
Okay.